Canto 34. Walking up to the ride, if one could call it a ride, there was a sign. It read, Cal's Funhouse View of Hell. I am the way to a forsaken people who would live in eternal sorrow. This is why divine omnipotence moved this architecture into place, created from primordial love and intellect for those who think they can carry anything that can outlast my love. Abandon all hope if you enter. Beside it was another sign with a tiny devil pointing to it that read, You must be this tall to ride. There were two lines. The lower one read, Sophie, and the taller one read, Cal. The first time Cal had heard those words, they were at the entrance of hell. Back then, he wanted to touch them. This time, he touched the colon that followed the word why. He didn't think about it, it just happened. It changed the meaning for him. It was a letter. God to a forsaken people. This is a love letter, he said in awe. I couldn't see that, but I do now. Sophie had been to his left, but now there was a man to his right. Hello, Cal quickly breathed in. Where the hell? The man finished. Sure. Where the hell did you come from? The man pointed from inside the mouth. I'm the curator for this experience. He touched his hand to his nose and lowered his head a little. Greetings. I'm Judas. We'll begin when you're ready. The Judas? Cal repeated, flabbergasted. Judas gave a sly grin. Yes, one and the same. Would you like to hear how I found myself in hell? For betraying Jesus, Cal answered before he could mentally ask himself whether a statement like that was rude. No, not betrayal. I never thought I was betraying Jesus. I knew he had the power to turn stones into bread and heal the least of us. I knew he was the very best of us, but I also knew he would never fight. I wanted him to be the warrior I was promised in scriptures. I wanted him to destroy Rome and all who would follow it. I was trying to force his hand. If I gave the Pharisees what they needed to crucify him, they'd discover he couldn't be crucified. He paused for a moment. I was very wrong. What did you think was going to happen? Cal wondered out loud, imagining very limited outcomes to crucifixion. I thought the moment I kissed his cheeks, he would smite them all. It would be bloody for weeks or months, and he would unseat the family of Herod and eventually Rome herself. You wanted to start a war? Cal asked. Judas shook his head. I wanted Jesus to destroy those who would continue to hurt Adonai's people. Then he dropped his head in defeat. When he looked back up, he added, Instead, Jesus looked at me like all that destruction I had wanted had really been put on him. Then he gave himself up. It was when he actually died I realized I was a fool. I killed myself. See, I was sent to hell for vengeance, not betrayal. There was an uncomfortable silence as the three took in what Judas had said. Anyway, Judas exclaimed, cutting through the silence, are you ready to enter your hell yet? My hell? Cal repeated. How could I ever be ready for something like that? Sophie squeezed his hand. You won't be alone. I'll be right beside you the whole time. What makes this my hell? Cal asked, a little reassured by Sophie's promise. You have spent this whole journey secretly and not so secretly questioning God's reasons and motivations for this place. The three of us walk into this mouth of hell, which, by the way, one of my favorites. There was this one that was a hairy Satan with three people being perpetually chewed in its mouth, and I was one of the three. Rude. Anyway, the three of us walk into your mouth of hell, and there's one person waiting for your judgment. Cal's heart jumped into his throat. I'm going to judge someone? Who? Is it a real person? Are there real consequences? Yes, Judas answered. All your actions have real consequences, and the person within is a real person. You must judge them correctly to be able to move on. Cal could feel it, the growing anxiety of holding that much power. What's the judgment? Judas didn't answer with words, but simply motioned Cal to enter. Looking at Sophie, she nodded her head. I'll be right here with you. Well, sort of, Judas cut in. We'll be nearby. You'll see us. I have to talk with your guide. Sophie's brows furrowed. Of course. Turning to Cal, she added, whatever you do, be honest. It won't help you to attempt to do anything but what is honest. Now it was Cal whose brows furrowed. I don't know if what I'm being honest about. He shook it all away. Fine, whatever. No, whatever it is, I'll be honest. Shall we? Judas asked. Taking a deep breath, Cal answered, let's do this. It was in taking the first step on the giant Satan's tongue that the entire view changed. They were no longer on a frozen lake. Instead, they were in the visitor area for what looked like a county or state jail. There was a guard standing in front of a barred door. Beyond it, Cal could see inmates sitting at tables. Some were talking to visitors. Others were waiting patiently for their visitor to arrive. All the inmates were wearing bright orange jumpsuits. Which person? You told me a person. This is a room full of people. Cal tried to calm himself by focusing on his breathing. Only one is for you, Judas promised. You'll know the second you walk inside. Cal scratched his upper lip with his bottom teeth. Okay. The guard, apparently waiting for some kind of affirmation, opened the door. Sophie let go of Cal's hand, and her and Judas went to go sit at an empty table. Cal stepped in and saw him, sitting by himself and looking straight at Cal, was his dad. A large part of Cal had hoped whoever he was supposed to judge would be a complete unknown to him. This was someone he loved and had recently deeply wounded him. How was he supposed to judge him fairly when he was the victim of his choices? Rather uncomfortably, Cal walked to his dad and sat down at the other side of the table. I knew it would be you, his dad said the moment he sat down. It could be no one else. Well, Cal, how have you been? You just saw me. Not much has changed since you admitted you sold my freedom. Awareness lit in his dad's eyes. I've been working through my issues for months. At least, I think it's months. You're telling me not even a day has passed since I last saw you? Just a few hours are all, Cal confirmed, but realized what if what his dad was saying was true? Perhaps time had no power in a place like this. So, I'm here to judge you? His dad looked down at the table, running his thumbnail over a scratch. Yeah, you're here to judge me. If you find me guilty, I go back to hell to work it out, but if you find me innocent, I move on to purgatory. Wait, Cal exclaimed. I thought I was being judged. They told me if I was found guilty, something would take my body, live my life while I was stuck here to work through it. His dad looked up, concern on his face. Look around, Cal. Do you think this is about you? I'm the one wearing the neon orange. I'm the one trapped here. You'll get to go after this. I know it. And if I'm your judge, which I doubt I am, I say move on. Go home. Find Keith. Fix what I broke. I can't, Cal yelled before he could stop himself. Checking himself, he continued much softer. Keith is happily married. All my friends have moved on. You left me with nothing, just a moldering shop that the city wants to own. What kind of justice is that, Dad?" His dad turned his head up and closed his eyes. Shaking it, he opened them again and looked at Cal. I didn't realize Keith got married." "Well, you didn't ask," Cal retorted. "I didn't ask because then they both finished in unison, "didn't want to know." "I didn't want to know because if Keith was always an option, then my choices were always repairable," his dad finished. "Sure. You leave me with all the responsibility, taking none for yourself, and Keith just waits in a tower for me to arrive. That makes sense." Cal's sarcasm was cutting, and he could see how it was affecting his dad. "I didn't want to know," his dad repeated. "Well, now you know. Anything else you want to confess while we're stating the obvious?" Cal asked. "I heard you talking to that lady right outside the pit," his dad said. "So?" Cal asked, not seeing why it was or wasn't important. "That's what helped me see what I was doing and accept how I was wrong. I was able to move on into the restorative part of hell." "That's just great," Cal quipped. "I'm not the son," his dad said with a bit of aggravation. "I know," Cal said back. "No. I said that stupid line about sour grapes because I've been focusing on how bad our family is. Pap went to strip bars almost every weekend. Uncle Ray and Doug sold those stupid fake cures that actually hurt people. I sold my son to a business that should have died with Pap. Meanwhile, you're the one paying for it. I set your teeth on edge." Cal shut up. He just looked at his dad, a father who was clearly struggling to try to say what was right when everything had already gone wrong. His dad continued. "Your Aunt Ruth was an amazing woman. She worked downtown at the soup kitchen every Wednesday night. She found donations to keep it open. Your mom." His dad pierced his lips and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears in them. "She still builds habitat houses. She helps with one every month. Your great-grandfather, he opened the store during the Great Depression, not to make a buck, but to help those who couldn't purchase goods themselves. Screw sour grapes. Chew on that. Know you can be whatever you want despite me." The two sat in silence, probably the first comfortable silence since he arrived in hell. Eventually he asked, "So, I find you guilty, you go back to hell? I find you innocent, you go to purgatory? I don't want to judge you. I shouldn't have to judge you, so I won't." His father swallowed hard and ominously nodded. "If you don't judge me, I'll stay here till you do." "But you're guilty," Cal blurted. "You said you're guilty. I know you're guilty. I don't want to say it. I'd rather say nothing at all. I don't want to move on knowing you're stuck in the visitors area of a jail or back in hell going through some of those levels." Cal stood and yelled out, "This isn't right. I know him. I shouldn't be held accountable for judging him." Judas, who was only a table away, talking to Sophie, held his hand up to pause their conversation for a moment. Turning to Cal, he said, "And that's God with all of humanity. God knows them all. Imagine that. God knows we are all guilty and doesn't want us to suffer. If this is hard to do with one person, just imagine what it's like with every single soul, with the whole of creation." "What do I do?" Cal asked Judas. "Forgive your father as God forgives us, and then you both may move on." Judas returned to his conversation. Cal turned to his dad. That's the real judgment. It's not whether you're guilty or innocent. It's whether you're forgiven or not. His dad sadly shook his head. Cal, I love you, and I'll understand either way, so don't carry this around if you choose not to, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what you lost and can't get back. I'm sorry I stuck you with my responsibility. Can you forgive me? Dad, Cal began, I still love you. It's why all this hurts so much. I trusted you and never thought you would try to deceive me. If I forgive you, I have to admit you did something wrong, and that's what I'm really struggling to do right now. I don't want to admit you broke me. His dad slowly nodded his head. Just know, I completely understand. I forgive you. Cal cut in. He took a long breath. I forgive you, he said more to himself. I forgive you, he said again to his dad, happy tears filling his eyes. He got up and went to his father, hugging him. Thank you, his dad said. I don't deserve it, but thank you. I think that's part of the point. None of us do. We have to move on, his dad said. Cal moved back to see Sophie and Judas standing behind him. The exit is on the other side of the room. All three of you may go. Don't look back. Just keep walking until you reach Purgatory. Dad? We can go? Cal exclaimed. We can go together? Well, let's go, he joyfully said. Saying a quick and joyful goodbye to Judas, the three nearly ran to the other side of the visitors area. It was just a door that read exit above it. There was no guard. Cal opened it, and there were stairs going up. He laughed, happy to see actual stairs instead of the sight of a pit or some hairy monster they had to climb. Purgatory is over hell, Sophie explained. We have to climb to get there. Is it as hard as climbing out of a pit? Cal asked. Stairs are always easier than pits, Sophie answered. With that affirmation, Cal began. With his dad and Sophie coming from behind, smiling, he felt as light as a feather, and the walk didn't seem difficult at all. Then, pop! His perspective shifted. Without warning, he was sitting in his shop holding a book. Looking around, he let go of the book and felt his body. Sophie? Dad? He yelled out. He realized he was back. He actually made it back. He gave a chuckle to himself. Then he quickly breathed in. He wasn't given a chance to say goodbye. Then he slowly exhaled. But he was allowed to remember. The front door opened. A man in raggedy clothes who looked strangely familiar walked in. He walked up to the counter and placed an ancient watch down in front of Cal. How much for the watch? Realization hit Cal immediately. He was not only back, but he was back only minutes before Sophie would walk in. Picking up the watch, he looked at it with new eyes. It was ancient. Probably it was a gift of some kind. Did someone give this to you? No, the person said. I inherited it. I need the money, so I'm selling it. He pushed the button at the top and the lid came down. There was the etching he'd have to buff out. Running his thumb over the words, he pulled out his loupe to get a better look. For Frank, love Sophia. Dropping the loupe, he looked at the man. He had the same soft curls Sophie's Frank had, the same nose as Sophie. Giving it a shot, he asked, "Santos?" Shocked, the man replied, "I didn't tell you my name." "Santos?" Cal repeated, realizing the importance of this meeting. "Who the hell are you?" Santos asked with more than an ounce of anger in his question. "I'm Cal," Cal answered, realizing that didn't mean anything to Santos. "I know your mom." "Fuck you. Give me the watch back," he said, holding out his hand. "I'll sell it on the street." "Are you going to buy drugs with it?" Cal asked, trying to figure out how he was going to die. "You are," he exclaimed when Santos flinched. "I know your mom. I met her in hell." "My mom isn't in hell. Give me the watch back," he yelled. "Santos." He needed something to change his mind. The button. He jammed his hand in his pocket. Nothing. Why did he think there would be a button? Then he had another idea. Opening the cash register, he pulled out a penny. "A penny for your thoughts." Santos stared horrified at the penny. "Mom isn't in hell. She'd been through enough." "No, you don't understand," Cal began, but Santos had ripped the watch from his hand and ran out the door. Pop! His view changed again. He was back in the staircase. He stopped. "Don't stop," Sophie said behind him. Cal wanted to turn around, but instead kept hiking up the stairs. "I saw him, Sophie. I saw Santos." "Wait, what? You saw my boy?" she asked behind him. "I was in my shop. It was minutes before you had come. The guy who had come in before you was Santos. I don't think he's going to die, Sophie. I think I'm here to save him." "What happened?" she asked. "I'll tell you when we get out of hell," Cal promised. "Deal," she said, and they climbed, headed for their next adventure. Cal and Sophie will return in Cal's Purgatory.